This morning. We're looking at, I'm going to stick this morning in Mark chapter 5, because that leads us through the two accounts that I wanted to look at. Mark's account of the Gadarene demoniac, I think, is the most complete, or it has more details than the other two do, and then it leads right into the healing of the woman with the issue of blood, and then the healing of Jairus' daughter, which is an odd kind of sandwich of a story, because you've got Jairus' daughter being healed, being really the main account, and then sort of right in the middle, you have this cutaway to a completely other thing. It kind of shows you that these stories, in particular that one, that's not the way you would write a story if you were doing it just to do it. That's not how you would make something up. Jesus, on the way to do one thing, has to stop and do a completely different thing. It doesn't work, except when it's in real life, because that's how real life works. Right? So anyway, that's just bit of a plug for that. Let's offer a word of prayer, and then we'll look at our text this morning. Our great God and our Father, we are so very thankful to be here with one another. We're thankful for the health and the safety you've given each one of us to be here. Father, we're mindful of those who, for various reasons, cannot be here. Some due to illness, and some are out of town, and perhaps even some that work at this time, Father. We're mindful of those things, and help us to be good servants to one another, to bear one another's burden. Help us to lift each other up in prayer, and then to lift each other up as we can help with our hands and our eyes and our abilities. Father, thank you for the text we're about to study. Thank you for the one whom you sent, on which this story is based. It's remarkable that the small amount that you gave us about Jesus is enough even to study for a lifetime. And we're thankful for the person you sent, who came to be your perfect image, to perfectly carry out what you would do, to be the true Adam amongst a fallen race. Thank you for this opportunity, Father, and thank you for the sacrifice that he gave freely and for all of us. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. Let's look at the text. This is Mark chapter 5. The first 20 verses there, I think probably breaking it up 5 verses apiece would be helpful. So that would call for 4 readers. Somebody want to kick off Mark chapter 5 and begin there in verse 1. Just the first 5 verses, and then we'll just pick up 5, 5, and 5. Okay, Sean's going to start us off.
When they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains. But he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones.
Okay, 6 and the next 5. Okay, go ahead.
But when he saw Jesus far off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country.
Okay, 11 to 15. Go ahead.
Now a great herd of pigs were feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, Send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And when they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man who had had the legion sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid.
Okay, 15 and, or rather 16 and through the end of the story there through 20. If you don't raise your hand, you get called on. All right, go ahead, Bob.
And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled.
Okie dokie. I absolutely love this story. Not because I feel like, not because I'm happy about what's going on with the man, but what happens to him and sort of the connections between that and who it shows Jesus to be. If you had to describe the man, give me one characteristic and we'll just kind of go around, right? Tell me one thing in the first few verses about the man pre-meeting with Jesus, okay? How does the text describe him? Just give me one detail and we'll just kind of circle around. All right, you got the first one?
Demon possessed.
All right, he's possessed with a demon. It's filling him, it's causing him to do things that normal people wouldn't
And
do.
apparently multiple demons.
Seems to be a whole congregation, right? Yep. Okay, he could not be restrained. Strong enough to tear apart bonds or ropes and shackles and chains and so on. All right. Other details.
Self-mutilating.
All right. He's cutting himself with stones in verse 5. All right. So, any other details you want to add? Okay, so there is, he does somehow in his possessed state recognize who Jesus is and even go beyond that, right? Before meeting with Jesus, what else is true about him? Yep.
It appears that he, because they were marveled because he was clothed and sitting calmly. So he must have been in tatters. He probably was wearing rags and would have been an interesting vision.
I'll do you one better. So in Luke 8 and verse 27, the parallel count to this, it says there at the end of verse 27, for a long time he had worn no clothes.
Okay,
So not just in rags, in nothing.
nothing.
He's running around in his birthday suit.
The other thing it said in there that what he had day and night.
Okay.
Come and go, he was consistent.
There's never any rest or any pauses in the action. At least when King Saul has his unclean spirit, you remember the one David would play and it would run him off for a while? That would be kind of an intermittent thing. This is an all the time thing. Okay, so there was even levels to that. If I describe this same person, but I left out all of the evil references, it would kind of ring some bells with you. Tell me who else in Scripture was possessed with a certain spirit and nobody could bind him. He could wrench chains apart. It's Samson, right? It's Samson in the book of Judges. Samson, who's filled with the Spirit of the Lord, and because of that has immense strength and cannot, be bound or contained until, of course, Delilah and the haircutting incident. I don't think the two are necessarily related, but this is almost like an evil version of that. Right? Someone that could do what Samson could do, that would put the picture in your brain, is running around in tombs and on the mountains. Right? So he's not running around where people typically live and where people really are concerned about being clean or unclean. He is unclean in every sense of the word. Right? He's naked, he's out of his brain, he's in the tombs, he's doing all this stuff. Yep.
Someone described this one time and said, this is literally the boogeyman.
Yeah.
This is the person
You're not wrong.
it's about. You don't go over there and play, there's this crazy guy that lives there.
Yeah.
You don't need to be running around in the mountains with your friends. You might run into whoever this is.
Yeah, this guy will hurt you.
Yeah.
You may not know what he's doing. Yeah.
Was the other, I was going to say unpredictable, because it seemed Jesus ran into him. You got to believe nobody came this way because they knew about this guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't go in that area because the crazy guy who lives there.
There is some interesting things in what he says in verse 7. What have you to do with me, Jesus? It's kind of like, what business do we have with each other? It's just kind of a way that they said that sort of thing. He calls him Son of the Most High God. So there's a recognition that he's not just the son of, he's the Son of the Most High God. There's a kind of the almost ultimate title sense. And then he says something weird at the end of verse 7. We get the don't torment me part. I hope we do. But what do you notice just before that? What? Yes, sir? Something
I
else?
don't know if that's what you were going for, but the thought that came to mind here is that he knew Jesus had, nobody could control this man, but Jesus could. And because he says that in that statement, I abhor you by God that you do not torment me. And so I don't know if that was where you were going.
It is, and it's a weird thing, but it makes perfect sense. Yes, ma'am.
Has Jesus encountered this man before?
I don't know.
Because so I beg you before God, do not torment me, for he had told him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And then he asked him what his name is. My connection there is to Luke 11.
Interesting.
And
So you're saying maybe they'd met before?
yes, so I have a connection there to Luke 11:24. Says, when an unclean spirit comes out of a man, it roams through waterless places looking for rest, and not finding rest, it then says, I'll go back to my house where I came from. And in returning, it finds the house swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and settle there. As a result, that man's condition is worse than his first.
Oh, okay.
So I'm wondering if someone had tried to exorcise him before, that spirit had left and gone, no, I liked it there, grabbed a few other demons, and then came back.
I don't know. I mean, I could say plausible, right? Sort of makes sense. He's definitely in a worse state than somebody that seems like with a single demon. I don't know. I never tied those two together. Right. What'd you have?
I think it's important when you look at it, Jesus isn't speaking to the man. He's speaking to the demon.
Right.
So that's how they know who Jesus is. I mean, they don't have to have met him before to know Jesus.
And it's an interesting contrast when you think about where has he just been? He's just gone and preached to people that basically said, well, who is this guy? And we know who he is. We know his family, we know his brothers, we know his sister, and who is he? And they were offended at him. It's interesting that the people were offended in him, and now he comes down, comes over, gets off the boat, and meets this demon or group of demons who recognize who he is.
Yeah.
The people refuse to recognize who he was, but of all people, the evil ones, they know exactly who he is.
Even, you've got the people in kind of general, and then you got the people in Nazareth who do that. Look at just the end of chapter 4. His own disciples asked the question, who then is this that the winds and the sea obey him? And so the demon recognizes he has to obey. Now what's weird is the end of verse 7. I adjure you by God. What is he saying? What's he admitting?
Well, he's admitting God's authority.
God's the only one who could tell Jesus what to do.
Yeah.
Which is true. That's the way Jesus operated. He said as much himself, right? He did the Father's will. He spoke the Father's words. His only hope, the demon's only hope, is that maybe God will tell Jesus to do something else. It's an interesting admission of that. Then he asked him what's the name, and then they begged to be sent into the pigs. The herdsmen flee. People come out to see what happened, and there is an interesting contrast. I think that's actually one of our questions. All right, so the demons called Jesus Son of the Most High God. Why were they called Legion, and where did they ask to go? He kind of says why they were called Legion, but there's a bunch of us, right? Yes, sir.
Just real quick before we leave that, at the end of verse 7, it's kind of ironic that the one thing that he asks is not to be tormented, when that's exactly what he's saying. He's going to cry out and cut himself. So he's obviously tormented. That's the one thing that he asks Jesus is not to be tormented.
Yeah. He's been doing what he's wanted to do, which is torment the guy, and he begs, please don't torment me. What would be the very worst thing for a demon? It would be to be cast out of his target, right? To be restricted from doing whatever he's been sent there to do. You're right. That is an interesting sort of request. What happened to the swine, and why did the people react this way? Or how did they react? Let's put it that way. The evil spirit enters the swine. They run into the sea, all right? Don't miss this. There is a man with an unclean spirit. Where does he live? He lives not just there, those aren't unclean of themselves. It's the tombs.
Tombs, okay.
A man with an unclean spirit lives in an unclean place,
And cuts himself so he'd have blood running along him.
causing his own victim to become ritually unclean, who asked Jesus to cast them into an unclean animal, resulting in running into the sea, right? Death is inherently an unclean thing of itself, right? It's Jesus who is perfectly clean and perfectly holy against all levels of being unclean and unholy. And at the end of it, the man winds up fine.
Isn't it interesting, though? I always wondered that. How is it there's so many pigs? Is that historically accurate? I mean, I never researched it, but it seems odd that there were so many pigs where they were, as you say.
It has to do with where they are. It has to do with where they are. I think they're on the east side of the Sea of Galilee.
Okay,
So they're getting more and more towards Gentile territory.
okay.
I think the reason why also in verse 20, he tells him to go home to his friends and tell them how much he had done. And where does he go? He goes to the Decapolis,
Yeah.
the 10 cities region of that area, which was predominantly Greek and Gentile influenced, right? So makes sense that there would be someone around there farming swine, probably a larger Gentile population than what you would have in Bethlehem or somewhere like that. And that would be my guess. Did you? I saw a wave. Yeah.
And no, I'm not sure if we can know this for sure, but after the pigs run off the cliff, the goal of the demons was to destroy life. And with what they did with the swine.
I agree. They're not in the best interest of the people. One other thing. I don't think it's in here. What did the healed guy ask of Jesus, and what did Jesus tell him? The man who was healed asked for what?
Go with Jesus.
I want to go with you. How did he do it? What does it say in your Bible? How did the man ask? He begged him. Who else in the story begged Jesus? It happens twice else other than that. The demons beg Jesus, don't torment me. Who else begs? The townspeople beg for Jesus to go away. So not only does this idea of uncleanness kind of run a thread through the story, but begging. To what sort of person do you beg? Your authority or your superior. Everybody at every level of the story begs Jesus for something. The demon begs him, don't torment me. The townspeople beg him to leave. Which, by the way, when someone casts demons into swine, that's the only way you better talk to him. Okay, you don't just kind of snap your fingers and wave your hand and hope that he goes away. This is a powerful, dangerous type person in their eyes. And then the man begs to go with Jesus. Jesus tells the man to go and, I mean, if there's not a good evangelistic verse, I don't know what verse 19 is. Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. That's evangelism in one verse. Go tell your people how much God did for you and how God showed mercy on you. And he did. And everyone marvels. Yep.
I'm not sure where I got this from, but I had a note here that when we get to chapter 8 and verse 1 and the feeding of the 4,000, we're in that area of Decapolis, however you say that. So when the great crowds arrived, perhaps the way
Yes.
from this man.
I think
And I don't know why I got that.
I think that's true because of Mark 7 and verse 31. He returns from Tyre and Sidon and finds himself in the Decapolis. Now, 8 and verse 1 doesn't tell us that's exactly where he is, but I think that's probably true. Right? So I think that's probably valid. So he does come back.
Home, that's how the people knew who Jesus was, for there to be a great crowd.
Okay, before and after. Give me a before and after of the man. Because we didn't really get this one verse out of the story. Before and after. What is he before and what is he after? Give me one before and one after.
Shouting, he's quiet.
Okay, so he's shouting and raving and so on. Verse 15 tells us he's in his right mind. Right? What else?
before he's clothed.
Yep, he was naked before,
Yeah.
now he's clothed and in his right mind. What else? He had a host of demons within him, and now he's healed, alone, secure, well, conscious, well in his mind. What else?
Say tormented versus peace.
Yeah. He's a tormented man, now he's at peace. He was hurting himself before, now he's not hurting himself. What gets me, and I think, let me look at Luke again. I think Luke actually gives the other detail to that. Yeah, I don't see it there either. The guy in Mark 5, the first 5 verses, you don't see him, somebody kind of sitting calmly waiting for people to pass by, right? This isn't what you would imagine. This is a lunatic. He's running around. He probably looks like Gollum. He's cutting himself, right? He's insane. But then in verse 15, I love this contrast. He was sitting there, so he was in control of himself, clothed and in his right mind. Those three things are powerful, right? What he was before versus what he was afterwards, right? Yeah.
We don't know about the man before, whether he believed or knew Jesus. But clearly afterwards, he knew Jesus and believed Jesus and recognized who Jesus was, which was very, very important.
Okay. This is a story about a before and after of a person that encounters Jesus. How does this help us understand the effect Jesus has on a person today? We don't encounter demon possession anymore. But the before and after aspect of this is powerful enough to help us see before Jesus and after Jesus. So give me an example. What does a person look like before they encounter Jesus, and what happens to them afterwards? This may even be from your own experience or from someone that you know. Right? What should the before and after look like if a person comes to Jesus? Give me one thing. What's that? Okay, so what is it about their lifestyle that's going to be different? Because lifestyle is like a really big thing. Okay. So he has no interest in Jesus beforehand, and now he's very interested. Okay, so his priorities, you might say, have shifted drastically. All right, what else? Yeah.
I mean, authority, like a person generally, before they come to Jesus, uses anybody else, the world, drugs, anything to lead their life. And then a person who has found Jesus, let Jesus have the authority. And, yeah.
That's a good way of putting that. The authority in a person's life shifts dramatically, either from someone on the outside or just themselves, really being the highest authority, shifting to not I but Christ. Okay, so what a person holds as their standard and who tells them what to do changes. Yeah.
Enslaved to sin, free from sin.
Yep. Their attitude towards that which makes them unclean and unholy and torments them is different before and after. Right? Yes, sir.
I hadn't thought of this before, but when Megan was talking about authority, yes, we aren't demon possessed anymore, but I wonder how often we are still serving so many different authorities before Jesus that we're still kind of that legion mind, that there's no one thing that you're focused on and that you're searching after, and you're following the politics of the day, or the scientific minds of the day, or your friends, or the drug dealer down the street, and maybe all of them at the same time, and
Yeah.
how chaotic and crazy that is versus the singular purpose and clarity of following one true authority in Jesus and God.
That's an awesome way of putting that. I mean, we wouldn't say people are possessed, but they are still, in a sense, controlled by powerful spirits, influences, goals, misinformation, all those sorts of things. Versus, now there's a singularity as to what they hold and what they care about. I like it. All right.
It should have a calming effect on us.
Hey,
That's kind of what David was saying.
it'll be a product of that, sure.
Yeah.
Instead of raving and running to and fro from here to there and not having a focus, and certainly not being a productive. You think this guy's a productive member of society? Is he helping his fellow Jews at synagogue? No. He's a liability, is what he is. He's a danger to his fellow man. The person that comes to Jesus afterward becomes a blessing to their fellow man. It becomes a source of strength and confidence. The transformation was so drastic that the people of the town, or in the city and in the country, interestingly, the herdsmen go and they tell the people. The man himself doesn't leave Jesus, but it's the people who own the pigs that go running around spreading this news, and then they ask Jesus to leave. But yeah, all of that. Yep.
When you were talking, it just made me think the same thing. The man before had really no value. Afterwards, he can preach and teach as himself an example. Before we're converted, are we a good example? Can we, preach and teach others and be effective? But afterwards, we most certainly are. So that's an important.
Yeah, so the value argument, certainly in terms of value to a community, value to others, this man is as valuable to God beforehand as he is afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I'm not diminishing.
I know.
I'm saying his actions and what he's able to do.
Right. God cares deeply about this man, even as he's afflicted. And it doesn't say God sent Jesus, but Jesus just happens to go walking by, right? There's a providential aspect to this. And he's a man, he sees Jesus from afar off, right? All right. We're going to lose all kinds of time on the next one. Did you have a thought, Julian?
Well, just kind of a crazy thought.
Well, we're talking about a crazy man, so it's okay.
Well, this man wants to go with Jesus. Well, everybody knew what he was before. He demon possessed. And, of course, the Pharisees said Jesus did what he did out of Beelzebub. It just crossed my mind, would that possibly be a reason why Jesus said no, go back home?
I don't know. I tell you what is a kind of a cool thought, and I have absolutely no proof of this. Do you suppose this man could have been there in Acts chapter 1? With the 120 that are sitting with Jesus' apostles and Mary and the others that follow Jesus? He wouldn't have qualified to be an apostle, okay? Because an apostle had to have followed Jesus from the time of his baptism till his resurrection. That was what Peter says in Acts 1. There's a big bunch of people there in Acts 1. 120 people. My sentimental side would like to think he was there. It's a cool thought. One more thing.
I've heard the point made before. Sometimes there are people who travel the world and preach the gospel. There's also people that are told to go and tell your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those matter. It doesn't matter that he wasn't next to Jesus for the next however many years. He was given something to do, and it appears he did it.
He had a simple story and he told it. I like it. Okay, the woman and Jairus' daughter. Let's get this read and then we'll talk about it for as long as we can. All right. Mark 5, beginning of verse 21. I'll pick up the first 5 verses there, and if someone will kind of take up after me, we'll read down to verse 43. It says in verse 21, when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, so he was on the east side of the Sea of Galilee in the predominantly Gentile area. He's going to cross back over, kind of go more towards the Jewish side of the lake. A great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live. And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Okay, verse 26. Mark.
And had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, for she said, If I only may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately a fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, touch my clothes.
Okay, verse 31. Go ahead.
His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing against you, and you say, 'Who touched me?' So he was looking around to see who had done this. And the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came with fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him to hold her. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be free from your affliction. While he was speaking, people came from the synagogue leader's house and said, your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?
Okay, verse 36. Yes.
But when Jesus overheard what was said, he told the synagogue leader, don't be afraid, but only believe. He did not let anyone accompany him except Peter, James, and John, James' brother. They came to the leader's house, and he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep. They started laughing at him, but he put them all outside. He took the child's father, mother, and those who were with him, and entered the place where the child was.
Okay, 41 through 43. All right. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumai, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Okay? Reverse order in the story. Why tell them to give her something to eat? Because it happens elsewhere in the Gospels too, and I think for the same reason. I mean, yeah, she's been sick, so yeah, give her some, chicken soup or matzo ball if they had it, right? But why tell them to give her something to eat? So she's human and to show she's really alive. They're not seeing a ghost or a spirit or some sort of zombie type thing. Where else does that happen in the Gospels?
When Jesus comes to the disciples and asks for something to eat.
Yeah.
Show fed.
Yeah. It's the end of John's Gospel, John 19, right? Or 8, one of those chapters there at the end. Jesus comes to his own disciples after his resurrection, and they're, of course, upset about this, and they think he might be a spirit, and he says, what do you have? And they said, we have broiled, fish and bread. And he eats it in front of them. Same thing. Isn't it fascinating that, how do you want to prove someone's really alive? Have them eat something. That's what living people do. They eat things. That's what humans do. They eat things. Anyway, I could talk about Gideon, but there's another connection there. All right. For what did Jairus ask for? Yep.
Come lay hands on her so that she can be healed.
Interesting. We encountered someone earlier in in the Gospels who had the same sort of problem but approached it differently.
The centurion.
The centurion, the ruler of the Italian, not Cornelius, sorry, crossing the streams. He doesn't even recognize Jesus to be, he doesn't feel worthy to have Jesus under his roof. But the ruler of the synagogue says, hey, come here, heal my daughter. I don't have any reason to see why this would have been presumptuous or even sort of a prideful thing. It does say in verse 20, 22 and 23 that he implored him earnestly, right? So this wasn't this is not how you come and ask. You come in with all your energy, right? Yeah.
Think about this man's position. This man is in a position where most people of his caste, his level, have rejected Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But circumstances of life have forced him to come to Jesus because he needs something and he recognizes Jesus is the only one that can do this.
Yeah. I think the way the story is written bears that out too. It says in verse 22 that his name is Jairus and he's one of the rulers of the synagogue, right? And then it says again, go down to 35. there came from the ruler's house. Why not just call him Jairus? Because the story isn't about his name, the story is about his position, right? And then what does he say in the next verse? But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, that's the third time. They came to the house in verse 38 of the ruler of the synagogue. They don't even give him the decency in verse 40 to say his name again. It's just the child's father. It's a ruler of the synagogue having to come to Jesus to ask for something, right? And ask for something that only he can do. Why did Jesus stop on the way there? This is what I was talking about at the onset with the sort of the weird episode in the middle, right? Literally on the way to the house, something else happens. I don't think this is probably the only time it happened. This is just a good example of it. Yep.
Didn't mean she had died.
Well, after that event, right, after the thing that happens in the middle. What's the thing that happens in the middle?
A woman touches his garment.
Okay, just sort of out of the crowd. There was a great crowd. They thronged him, it says there earlier. If we didn't know the backstory, literally all it would be is this woman comes out of the crowd, touches his robes. Jesus stops and says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples kind of incredulously saying, "Are you serious? You know, look at the crowd here. What do you mean somebody touched you?" It's like the type of thing I say to my kids, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? Obviously, this is what happened. But then she comes and tells and reveals the whole truth in 33. Yep.
So to your point about verse 31 with the disciples just, incredulously commenting, "What do you mean, who touched you? Everyone's touching you." That's a weird thing to say right now, Jesus.
Yeah.
And it shows me how much they, even though they were with him every day, they didn't get it. Not really, not yet. And because they wouldn't have asked that question.
Right.
They truly grasped the magnitude of who and what he was at this point.
Well, and true. So there is a big element of they don't truly kind of see and understand what's going on. I also want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Jesus didn't say, "Who did I just heal?" All he said was, "Who touched my garments?" Jesus knew what had happened. The woman knew what had happened. They had no idea. So it is kind of an odd question. What do you mean somebody touched you? But you can sort of see it from their side going, why did he just ask why somebody touched him? Like that, you can see why that wouldn't have computed. Yeah.
Is there a place where it said, he said, "I felt the power leave me"?
Yes. So, verse 30. Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him.
Well, that's how he knew.
Jesus knew, the woman knew, the disciples didn't. Right? They had to be told the story.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if he's in a crowd, jostled, as the apostles have said, Jesus clearly allowed this woman to be healed, but there surely were inadvertent touches from the crowd that did not have the same effect.
I'd say so, yeah. Now, I thought you were going to ask me, how did he perceive and then turn? I don't know. This is he is a whole another pay grade above us to be able to know how that works and how that happens. But it's interesting. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, 33, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. We just read that earlier. Look at 5 and verse 6. The demon-possessed man comes and sees Jesus from afar. What does he do? Came, fell down before him, and then sort of started talking to him. The woman does the same thing. She comes, she falls down before him, she starts telling him what's going on. Kendrick, you have a thought?
Yeah, I think too, like, he knew. It's very interesting, like you were saying, how many people were pressing against him and touching him and that sort of thing. But when someone came to him and had the faith, had the intention, had the right heart, the right mind,
Yes.
she didn't jump right in front of his face and say, "Pay attention to me," right? It was literally just a small piece of his robe, and that happened, no matter what else is going on. So I think it's a very good example of, how many people are following Christ.
Yep.
How many people are following Christ the right way, right? How many people pray? How many people pray with the faith that God is going to listen, the faith that, Jesus will intercede for us. So, it's a very good example of that heart.
Yeah, it really just shows you faith in a nutshell, right? Obviously, she believes this. If I touch his garments, I'll be made well. That's a statement of belief. But then she goes and touches his garments. So this is the old argument. Well, which one saved her? The believing or the touching? And the answer is yes. The faith is acting on belief. The two have to be joined together for it to work. And your point about many people are touching him, but she's the only one being healed. Did the people who slapped Jesus just before his crucifixion just instantly recover of everything that ever happened to him? What about the centurions who probably held him down to nail him to the cross? Were they No, faith has to be involved in that, right? This isn't just, I'm this big healing battery and whoever touches me gets the zap, right? There's faith that has to be accompanying that for it to work, for it to have its effect, right? Your faith in verse 34 has made you well. Go in peace. Also, this is another lesson, right? If we talk about issue of blood, that also carries with it the theme from the last story of uncleanness. A woman who is perpetually unclean. She cannot be ritually clean because every time she washes herself, she becomes unclean again for 12 years, right? This is another woman in the same situation as the last man. Perpetually unclean, whom Jesus cleanses, and now she's clean again. It's a good lesson too of, if you're trying to fix yourself before coming to Jesus, you're wasting your time. Because you can't. No matter how much you try and how many doctors you go to and spend everything that she had, and she was worse off than when she started, right? It's the problem never gets better. The person never becomes healed and forgiven and holy before God until they come to Jesus. And once that happens, it happens completely. Right? You got people talk about it, anyway, I could go on into that. That's the second, isn't it?
12 years.
That's two.
12 years.
That's two. All right. Well, we got some of it. By the way, describe how Mark 5 describes the highest and lowest people in Jewish society. The absolute lowest people in Jewish society were the demon-possessed dude out in the graveyard. That's bottom tier. Who's the highest? It's the guy running the synagogue. Both of them need Jesus, right? Without Jesus, both of them can't be made better, can't be made right before God. It's a good lesson of that. All right. Next week, what I'd like to do is the rest of this lesson. I knew better than to try to do all of it at once. The visit to Nazareth, the 12 being sent out, which is only, like 3 chapters in Mark or Matthew, and then the death of John the Baptist. We're going to try to talk through those things, Lord willing, next week.